Alright, hello and welcome to a build discussion for the Oathbound Paladin using the Oath of Protection. Now, I know I had another video that I just put up recently. I didn't really say a whole lot in it. It was a lot of gameplay and whatnot, but it was also me kind of glossing over things. So this is actually going to touch a little bit more on gear, enchantments, again, the reasoning behind certain feats that I've taken, certain powers that I have. And this is really just so that anyone coming into the channel doesn't have to go through all of my previous videos to actually have an understanding of what it is that I've done and why I've done it. My video that I put up just the other day, if you want to, watch it. It's not required, because this one is going to pretty much cover everything top to bottom. So let's actually get into the meat and potatoes of this. So race is, I would say your best option is going to be the Dragonborn if you have one. I didn't go Dragonborn. I'm actually running a half-elf here, and frankly, I'm doing pretty well for myself. So really what it's going to boil down to as a protection paladin, you're going to want to be focusing on constitution and charisma. Now, charisma is action point gain and companion stat bonus are going to be the two big ones, as well as stamina regeneration, because you want to keep your block up as well as your self-heal when you're doing it. And constitution, damage resistance, and hit points. That's pretty much a given. Now, you could also go with dexterity if you wanted to increase your deflection chance. Yeah, honestly, charisma is probably still going to be the better option, and that's just from your companion stat bonus. But you can run the numbers on it if you wish. You can kit out a companion with bonding runestones and compare the two, see which one really plays in better to you, and for how you play. This is just simply what I found works better for myself. So let's actually start looking at it here too. So obviously, as you can see, I'm packing 2.8k gear score. Not the highest you can get, not by a long shot. I'm not going to sugarcoat that one bit. There's gear on here that I'm constantly changing out. So this will change and my character will improve, as I'd mentioned before. So starting from the top, I went Elemental Drowcraft for pretty much all but one of my pieces of equipment, where I've got the Frostborn Restoration Gauntlets. The big reason why I went with that is actually because this, unlike the Elemental Drowcraft Gauntlets, doesn't have critical bonus. And I don't have any of the Dragonflight set yet, but I am working on that. So once I get that, that's probably going to come into play. So I'm also running lots of Dragon Horde enchantments just so that I can get materials to refine my stuff to be even more powerful. Now, my armor, I am currently running a rank 7 Azure enchantment and a pure Shadowclad. Obviously, my rank 7 Azure enchantment I can do much better. I haven't yet, but that's definitely something I'm also working towards. Now, pure Shadowclad, I went for both the stacking damage resistance and the stacking deflection chance. Now, the only negative with that is you lose all stacks once you deflect something and you have to build it back up. But as a tank, there's a good chance you're going to be building those up pretty quickly. So it pays for itself from what I've been able to playtest with it so far. My weapon and shield right now is the Twisted set. If you can't get your hands on the Twisted set, by the way, go for the Water set, because the random chance to heal yourself is actually quite handy. I went with the Lightning enchantment for my weapon. As I'd mentioned in my previous video, it is because of the cooldown. Whenever the lightning hits your main target, you get a 2% cooldown reduction and then 1% cooldown reduction for every other target it bounces off of, up to a maximum of 3 targets as far as I recall. So it helps push the cooldowns, which is nice because I'm not saying cooldowns were a problem before, but now they're really a non-issue. So then we get into my neck piece, which I've gone with the Amulet of Tiamat's Demise. I'm looking at another one I'm going to play around with, but right now this is what I'm using. My rings, I've gone with the personalized rings of piercing. I do want the Underdark rings instead, because frankly, I don't need this much armor penetration. My armor penetration is through the roof. Oh, yes, and also both of them are running Radiant and Azure enchantments. So I'm actually stacking a lot of power. Now, the Greater Plated Band of Constitution, well, more Constitution is more hit points and more damage reduction, and also more hit points on the belt itself. Always kind of nice. The only thing I don't like about it, more armor penetration, but whatever. And then I get into my undergarments, again, more armor penetration, but what I really wanted was the power, defense, and deflection that I get off of them. The hit point bonus, not really sold on it, but I like these more than the Drowcraft ones, so this is why I'm running them, because I like the stat distribution a bit better. So getting into the artifacts, obviously you can see I've got the Wheel of Elements here. Very handy active power. Also, the passive stats are nice, extra hit points, power, stamina gain. I'm also currently running Bruner's Helm. Defense, definitely also nice. Lifesteal, very handy. The Great Weapon Sigil. I have this primarily just for the power and the hit points. And then, last but not least, power, combat advantage, and armor penetration on my Spheres of Annihilation. This I'm probably going to change with the Forge Hammer of Gond or some other artifact that I've got kicking around. So, I haven't done it yet because they are not legendary or mythic. So, getting into the feats. So I glossed over this the other day. I have Divine Action here, so rank 5 of 5, so 5% of my max AP is generated every time I use it. And Toughness, which is an increase to my hit points, which never say no to but plus to hit points, because that does also give you more power as you go, because as you take hits, a certain amount of that damage against your hit points increases your power. I think, was it 10% of your health? Yeah, up to a maximum of 10% of your health. Hold on a sec. Okay. And so the other one is Exemplar's Haste. Again, faster cooldowns. Can't say no to that. By the way, if you roll human, you want to max this one out at 3 of 3. And you will probably also want to take 2 points into Impassioned Plea. If not, what was the other one? Well, Wrathful Strikes is always handy. So Impassioned Plea and Wrathful Strikes, take your pick. But you either want 2 of 3 of this if you're not human, 3 of 3 of this if you are, because you get 3 extra feats. Steadfast is an absolute must, just because of the extra hit points that you get for every point of Constitution. So, now, getting into your Paragon feats, if you will. So, Swift Flash, when you're struck by a foe, you have a chance to increase your movement speed by 30%. Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's great for helping you move around a fight very quickly. Then Flash of Light, encounter powers have a 25% chance to reduce the cooldown of nearby allies' encounter powers by 10%. This is incredibly useful, especially if you're in a group where you have characters that have really long cooldowns, don't have a lot of recovery invested, or, let's take a look at the Hunter Ranger, for example. If you're running with Hunter Ranger, you don't really need to worry about this too much, but if you're running with, Great Weapon Fighter, this will help reduce the cooldowns on a lot of their really damaging abilities. So it has better uptime for certain classes and more functionality for certain classes than others. Definitely not something to overlook. Radiant Champion. So this is also useful. A bonus to movement speed and cooldown reduction just when you have people nearby. You can't say no to that. So this is the thing about the Justice Tree, by the way. You'll probably notice this as I go. It is all about reducing your cooldowns. Because the trick to being a effective paladin and an effective paladin tank is to have as short a cooldown as possible at all times. Now, we'll go from that and we'll actually have a look at Echoes of Light here. Now, Echoes of Light is really where it's at. So once every 15 seconds, your at-will powers have a chance to trigger an Echo. Rate at rank 5, it's a 10% chance. That will instantly refresh all of your power encounter powers on your next encounter power use. So let's say you've blown 2 encounter powers and you're just hammering away with one of your at-wills, and all of a sudden you get Echoes of Light, or Echo, suddenly triggers, and you use your 3rd encounter power, all 3 encounter powers refresh. So this is why you want that. So then you also get Purifying Fire. At-will fire powers apply Purifying Fire onto foes. Stacks up to 5 times, dealing 10% weapon damage each time a stack is applied. This damage is doubled for each stack applied to the target. So first one is going to be 10% of my weapon damage. Then it's going to be double that, double that, double that, then double that again once it hits 5 stacks. Lasts 60 seconds, which is really cool, but is cleared when you use an encounter power. So this is your filler for when stuff is on cooldown. So this is actually really good for additional damage. Also really great for generating extra threat. And then you have your capstone, which is Vengeful Judge. Divine Call now applies Judge to yourself, increases the damage you deal by 35%, as well as reducing your cooldown of all your powers by 35%. Your encounter powers have a chance to immediately grant you a charge of Divine Call. So this is one of the big reasons why, as a paladin, as a protection paladin, especially if you're in a group, you want to be using Vengeful Judge as often as possible. There is no stated cooldown. I haven't found one yet. There might be one baked in, but I haven't noticed it. The only thing limiting you from spamming the ever-living bejesus out of this is the fact that it requires Divine Call energy charges. Now, we're going to get into these two here. So Beacon of Hope and Prism. Now, of these two, Beacon of Hope is actually the one that I want to keep. I'm actually going to get rid of Prism when I get my next free spec done. And so Beacon of Hope, activating a daily power causes you to become a Beacon of Hope for 6 seconds. Randomly, 3 allies within 30 feet who have taken damage will be healed. It's rank 5. 250% of my weapon damage every 2 seconds. For 6 seconds. So 3 times they will get healed for 250% of my weapon damage. That is pretty awesome. That has also saved my ass a few times. Just saying. Now, Prism is kind of one of those ones where when you... I'm not sold on it. When you activate a daily power, you become a Prism for 20 seconds. During this time, any heals you get are distributed to allies within 30 feet. Now, it can't be triggered by heal over times. That's actually probably the big reason I don't like it. Because a lot of healers will still use heal over times, others will use direct heals. All in all, it's kind of a wishy-washy ability. I would rather trade this for one of the Bulwark abilities. Now, right now in Bulwark, so I have taken Unflinching Resolve just to to increase my control resistance. Now, being crowd controlled kind of sucks a lot, especially as a tank. So that's actually one of the things I do want to cover as I go through this. Now, what I would replace Prism with is actually going to be Standfast. It won't be active all the time because, let's face it, you're a tank. You're probably not going to stand there taking every big hit comes your way. If you can get out of the way, chances are you probably should. That being said, when you are standing still and you're taking a lot of punishment, having an extra 5% damage resistance and a 5% deflect chance boost isn't a bad thing. Just saying. I find this would be more beneficial to me than Prism would be. You don't have to do this yourselves. Just throwing that out there. If you want, I would take Prism and of Light if you don't like the idea of taking Stand Fast. Just because that means your own self heals will heal you for a little bit more. You can't really go wrong with that. So now let's look at Boons. Now, I didn't really touch on this too much because honestly, I really glossed over this the other day. Wasn't really feeling like breaking this down. But, today, different day, feeling a little bit better about it. So, let me start at the bottom. Elemental Evil campaign, because this is where everyone's really going to actually start. Well, this and Tyranny of Dragons. But let's start with Elemental Evil, because it is the one that's actually at the bottom. Unassailable Tide. 300 defense, 2,000 maximum hit points versus 300 power and 2,000 maximum hit points. Normally I would stack with power, but the defense is definitely a better investment in this case. And you'll see why as I go. But basically at this point, you do want to stack survivability. Because if you don't have enough defense, well, let's face it, you're going to take hits that are just going to be too big, period. Then I went with Heart of Stone, 4% lifesteal severity, and another 2,000 maximum hit points over 400 regeneration and 2,000 max hit points. If anyone here has seen my first video about the Paladin, regeneration is useless. It does nothing for you in combat. The only time it does you any good is out of combat. And let's face it, if you're in a good party, or you've got a decent amount of lifesteal, or you're using your block enough as a paladin, or let's face it, or you're popping your dailies, you actually probably don't need regeneration. Chances are you'll end that fight at full hit points. So you don't really need this. Then between Searing Aggression and Blazing Resilience. So here is the bane of my existence with this build. It's Critical Strike. So obviously I avoided that, and I went Blazing Resilience for the recovery, for better cooldowns, and the 2,000 hit points. Now, here's the thing. These last 4 feats, there's really only 2 that are very good, in my opinion. Gale of Retribution is not going to be it, because it boosts your Critical Strike rating. But Wall of Wind, which increases your recovery by 1,000 after healing you, and also it heals you 24,000 hit points, which is always nice. Or this one, Furious Whirlwind. You could go with Bolstering Storm, but honestly, this is kind of nice. 10% lifesteal severity for 10 seconds. So if you have a very high lifesteal and you manage to kill something in that period, your next lifesteal for the next 10 seconds will be 10% higher. That's actually pretty good. So let's skip that and let's go to the maze engine here. Abyssal Siphoning. Again, lifesteal severity versus incoming healing bonus. Now, here's something kind of funny. You'll notice I don't take a lot of incoming healing bonus stat. The reason being, most healers in this game will overheal without you taking any of that stat. Period. It's just kind of how it works. So, I went with Abyssal Siphoning, because really Abyssal Regeneration wasn't not really required. Demonic Influence, 400 combat advantage versus Demonic Resilience. Control effects have a 5% shorter duration. Well, I mentioned earlier, being crowd controlled sucks. So the less you're crowd controlled and the shorter you're crowd controlled for, definitely go that route. So that's why I went this. Demonic Endurance, stamina regenerates 10% faster in combat, definitely a plus because I can be healing myself. Always good. Versus Demonic Swift, points 3% faster. I already gain action points pretty darn fast. And now, this last bit here, Control strength bonus, don't really need it as a paladin. It's kind of nice, but really the one thing you absolutely want to not take is this one. Do not take Baphomet's Might. I took Displace Fate because, why not? You never know. Increasing my damage resistance by 60% for 3 seconds, probably not a bad thing. Just saying. Okay, so Tyranny of Dragons. I haven't completed this, just because it's kind of a pain in the butt to complete. However, I went with all the defensive ones, which are all the ones that are on the top, so I went with Dragonheart for the bonus hit points, the bonus to deflect, the bonus to defense with Dragon Scale defense, Dragon's Greed, so I took the lifesteal rating as opposed to the regen, which is Dragon's Blood. Frankly, no one should take this, doesn't matter what class you're playing. And I took Dragon's Thirst, which is a 3% increased lifesteal. That is a base 3% on top of what I already had, and I already had a 6% lifesteal, so I'm sitting at 9. So, definitely something worth taking. So, what's that? 9% lifesteal. I keep myself decently healed, although having a healer is certainly going to be better. Underdark. Now, as you can see, I haven't completed this one either because I haven't been that sold or hard-pressed to finish this one, but I will talk about those particular boons anyways, because there are 2 in particular that, as a paladin take, you would definitely want to consider taking. Now, the other 4, Primordial Vitality, should be pretty self-explanatory. 400 defense, 1600 hit points. You want that, as opposed to power and hit points. Primordial Regenesis, more lifesteal, as opposed to Critical Strike. Well, we don't want Critical Strikes, let's go with lifesteal. Drown Meditation, hey look, 1200 regeneration. That's not going to do us any good. So, take Combat Advantage bonus, because as a tank, if you're playing this right, you're keeping your bosses facing away from your party. They're all hitting it in the butt. You're getting Combat Advantage. So you're getting this bonus at all times. Dwarven Footing. Control effects now have a 5% shorter duration when applied to you. Coupled that with the previous one. Also a 5% shorter duration, so you're not going to be crowd controlled very long. Alright, so the last boon to take, I would actually probably go with Abyssal Strikes. 10% damage versus demons. Demon Slayer, pretty much useless. 0 to 5% chance, depending on the demon's hit points, to instantly slay a lesser demon. Really, the only demon you would ever want is going to be a boss, so, and yeah, that's never going to trigger, so why bother? And Abyssal Tenacity, demons do 5% less damage to you. So, Abyssal Tenacity and Abyssal Strikes, those are the 2 you really want to actually consider taking. Pick one, whichever one you find will be of more use to you. Personally, I will probably take Abyssal Tenacity, just simply because a lot of the demon bosses are they actually hit pretty hard. Well, here's looking at you, Orcus. So, let's also now move on to Icewind Dale. So I cleared Icewind Dale. I took Weathering the Storm, so bonus to AoE resist as opposed to combat advantage bonus. Really, at this point, both of these would be a good choice. Pick your poison. Appreciation of Warmth, which is incoming healing bonus, or Refreshing Chill, which is stamina gain. I went with stamina gain again because your healers, they naturally overheal. So, Rapid Thaw, 400 recovery versus Sleet Skill, which is 2% critical severity. I'm not a crit build, so I went with Rapid Thaw. Cool Resolve, gain up to 2,000 power based off of how much stamina or guard you are missing. Very handy because you should be blocking a lot, so this will actually be triggering kind of a lot. And last but not least, there's a few here where you could go Shared Survival. 10% heal to everyone around you when you take a potion. Or Winter's Bounty, 10% bonus to action points when killing a target. I went with Avalanche. because I'm a tank. I'm going to get hit. So what this does is when you're damaged by an enemy, you have a chance to take a stack of Avalanche. At 20, it clears and you do 15,000 damage to everything nearby. It doesn't get triggered by damage over time abilities, but that's not a problem because you're going to be taking a lot of direct damage anyways, so who cares? Alright, moving on to Dreadring. So, Reliquaries keep your strength, power, and movement. 250 to each. Absolutely. Conjurer's Gambit, critical strike and movement. Well, we don't want critical strike, so that's why I went with that one. Evoker's Thirst, 400 lifesteal. Illusory Regeneration, by the way, is literally a boost to your regen stat. Yeah, avoid that. Doesn't matter really what class you play. You should never need this. Illusion Shimmer, bonus to deflect. I didn't take Forbidden Piercing because I don't need armor penetration. Enraged Regrowth. When taking damage, you have a chance to heal up to 20,000 hit points, and at the end of that, you have 4,000 more defense for 10 seconds. Pretty darn sweet. Shadow Touch was the other one that was kind of nice. Target receives 25% less healing from spells after you have a random chance to deal 20,000 necrotic damage over a few seconds when you're hitting an enemy. Enraged Regrowth just kind of struck me as being a little bit more useful in the immediate. Maybe I'll switch it out for Shadow Touch eventually, but Enraged Regrowth definitely has been helping. Now, with this one here for the last, we got Augmented Thane Bastion is a possibility. Frankly, that shield sucks, though. At 10,000 damage, there are regular enemies that will hit you for over 30 grand. That it just eats through that. There's no point. Rampaging Madness is the one I took. And it's just from whenever you deal damage once per every second. 4,000 power, 4,000 lifesteal, and 4,000 regen. Don't really need the regen. For 10 seconds after you gain 50 stacks of this. You can only gain 1 stack per second, so it will literally take you 50 seconds. This whole cycle is 1 minute. The only other thing that rivals Rampaging Madness, honestly, is Endless Consumption. I'm actually seriously considering this, and that is because the random chance it has to triple your lifesteal severity. So, why would you not really want? This is definitely good for a lot of DPS classes that might find they have very high lifesteal and take a lot of damage. This could be very useful to you. I went with Rampaging Madness, though, because I wanted the extra 4,000 power when it triggers. So, that was my logic behind that. Moving on to Sharandar here. So we've got, again, they're all the defensive ones. I went with Dark Fey Warder, so 400 defense, 400 deflect. I went with Feywild's Fortitude for the max hit points of 1,600. Elven Tranquility. When being struck by a foe, you have a chance to heal yourself for 20,000 hit points. I have a few of these, by the way, if you've noticed, that, excuse me, random chance on taking damage that, I heal myself. And last but not least, Faith Thistle. When you deflect an attack, you deal 3,000 damage to your attacker. Well, since I eventually plan on having a very high deflection rating, that is going to come in very handy for dealing nice supplementary damage as I go. And that's really the point of that. I mean, I could have gone with Elvish Fury, or maybe Elven Resolve. Yeah, no. My stamina already regenerates quickly. Faith Thistle just seemed to be the best option. Now, last but not least, oh, and by the way, you'll notice I skipped over the Guild Strongholds boons, and that's simply because that's going to be determined by the guild you're in. The guild I'm currently in doesn't have any, but some guilds out there will have a good selection. Look at what they have, consider what stats you need to buff, and use those. I mean, by now you should have a rough idea of what it is you're looking for anyways. Now, looking into Storm King's Thunder, we have Frosty Demeanor, which I took. 2% control resistance and extra hit points, because, again, control resistance. Hardy Constitution, better stamina gain, and Everfrost damage resistance, because I hate Everfrost damage. Chill Determination, 2,000 recovery based off of how much stamina or guard you are missing. So this actually plays in very well with the other one that increases your power based off of how much stamina or guard you have left. So the shorter cooldown from guarding a lot and the better power stat from using your guard a lot, they work well together. Now, I haven't taken either Vengeful Heat or Glacial Strength yet. Honestly, I will probably go with Glacial Strength just for the extra 3,200 hit points. And the last option here, I will probably have to go with Chill of Winter, because the rest of these, well, maybe Frozen Reflection, deflected attack to deal 5,000 damage to your attacker, plays in well with the one that I have from the Sheridar campaign that does 3,000 damage. 8,000 damage per deflect with a high deflect would be kind of nice. Titan's Affinity, healing potions now heal you for more. Healing Warmth, healing spells have a chance to damage 5 enemies near the target for up to 4,000 damage. Really great if you're a healer. Not really going to help me. But basically at this point, it's going to be between Chill of Winter and Frozen Reflection. Because, let's face it, you're going to be beating on a lot of guys, so the extra damage from that in an AoE burst is kind of nice. And Frozen Reflection, well, a lot of guys are going to be hitting you, so you got a really good chance to deflect an attack. So you're probably going to do a decent amount of 5,000 damage hits back on guys when you deflect. So they're both not bad choices. Okay, so companions. This is kind of really where things get to be a bit more interesting. So you'll notice I have here 2 Archons. I've got my main companion I keep running around with me, which is my Paranoid Delusion. And I also have a Young Yeti, who is legendary. I don't use him, but I keep him around for his passive. And Peaches, which is an Owlbear cub. So let's have a look as to why I have these, by the way. So Siegfried here, who is my Air Archon, increases my damage against targets that are not at full health by 3% and increases it by an extra 0.5% for every Archon I have. My Paranoid Delusion will eventually be replaced by a Fire Archon. So that will actually become a 4% damage bonus, just because I'll have the extra Archon. Then I got Titan, Earth Archon. Yeah, kind of a lame name, I know. Increases target damage against targets by 4% when you are at full health. Each additional active Archon increases this bonus by 0.5%. Now, obviously, as a Paladin and as a tank, I'm going to get hit a lot. Now, if you play the Paladin properly, you probably shouldn't have a whole lot of trouble keeping your health topped up, just because of one of the core mechanics that we have. And I'll get into that in a little bit. So that bonus is actually active almost all the time, contrary to what you might think. Now, Paranoid Delusion is kind of handy. Increases damage against rooted, disabled, held, or prone targets by 3%, so anything that's been crowd controlled, very useful. Not so useful in bosses, because you can't crowd control bosses. Everything else, though, absolutely useful. Yeti. On damage taken, 10% chance for you or your companion to become bloodthirsty and increasing damage you deal by 10%. You notice that when this happens because either you or your companion will get larger. The extra 10% damage, very handy. And Peaches. Peaches is awesome. Peaches is probably the main reason why this build really pulls itself together, especially in terms of dealing damage. And that is, as long as this companion is in your active companion slot, you don't even need to summon this guy to have it work. When you fail to critically hit with an encounter power, you do an additional hit equal to 50% of your power. So what that means is, right now, if I fail to critically hit, I do an extra 8,000 damage. When I am in combat, taking hits and buffing myself up, my power stat goes over 50,000. So when I fail to critically hit, I am hitting guys for an extra 25,000 damage on an encounter power. I also have an encounter power, Burning Light, which hits multiple times. So that damage stacks up really fast. So that's the secret for doing good damage with this build. I'm not gonna lie, this is expensive, but absolutely work towards getting one. I cannot stress that enough. Now, looking at what gear I currently have on my companion now, I know some of the stuff you won't be able to get anymore, right? Well, I won't say anymore, but right now you won't be able to get some of this stuff because they have shut down the Sword Coast Adventures for using on their website. And that's actually where I got the Icon Loyal Master, the Talisman Loyal Master, and the Sword Knotted Loyal Master from. There are other things you can put in there to make a companion relatively powerful as well. These have just simply been the best I've been able to find for the time being. There are probably better that you can get. I wouldn't doubt that one bit. This is just the best I've been able to find so far. Now, why I went with these: good power stat, armor penetration, and I slotted in power and deflection. So what you'll notice is that right now most of my enchantments are rank 7 and rank 8. I'm going to be trying to push them up to rank 10 and 11 relatively soon, because I know that is actually going to be the biggest benefit I can give my character. Now, all of the Loyal Master stuff is plus to power, plus to armor penetration. It is actually because of my companion right now that I hit about 74% armor damage resistance ignored. And that puts me well over cap. 60% is where you should be. So I need to do some stat adjustments. So where a lot of that comes into play and why that's important is actually because of these guys, the Perfect Bonding Runestones. They're rank 10, maximum is rank 12. Now, as the tooltip says, when your companion activates a power, it doesn't matter what, it could be an encounter power, it could be an at-will power, it has a chance to grant you Companion's Gift, which grants you 65% of your companion's stats for 20 seconds for each Perfect Bonding Runestone equipped. Now, if you run the math on that, that's 190% right now. 190. Let me actually run the math on this one. No, it should be 195. It's 120, 180 plus 50, yeah, 195. So 195% of their stats, so almost 200% of their stats get added to my character for 20 seconds. And since that goon of mine is basically been constantly attacking, that buff never wears off while I'm in combat. Now, okay, so 195% of what stats? These. 690 deflect, 2400 armor penetration. No, I don't really care about the critical strike, and almost 5000 power. So I get almost, we'll say 9600 power from this goon whenever she triggers an ability. So definitely worth having these. Again, these are an investment and a half, alongside an owlbear cub here like Peaches. These should also be a main focus to you. Now, I had mentioned the Fire Archon being a good choice as well for a companion. I've got one here. Increases your damage against targets with less than 50% hit points by 5%. That is flat. It is not modified by having other companions. The thing about that is, because it's an Archon, he triggers the other Archon bonuses, even though you do not need other Archons to trigger his. So it plays off of all of that quite well. So definitely worth having one of those. Yes, I am slowly working towards being able to upgrade him into Epic and then Legendary quality, because why the heck not? He's going to be eventually replacing Morail here, my Paranoid Delusion, once I can find good equipment for him. and that's probably going to be a little ways off. So, so the other thing about this is mounts. So I went with Untouchable for my mount power, 2000 deflection. If you're wondering where you get that, by the way, you get it from the Owlbear mount. At least that's where I picked mine up. There are probably other ways to get it. Now, in my stable, you'll also notice I have other things here, such as Wanderer's Fortune, so a chance to drop a bonus reward. Cavalry's Warning, when you use a mount combat power, receive a buff. Well, I don't have anything right now that can use a mount combat power. I just didn't have enough to take, I think it was a Magistrate's Patience on this guy. Oh, Survivor's Blessing. I didn't have enough insignias to take Survivor's Blessing. Protector's Camaraderie, when your companion attacks, you gain power and defense. You can't say no to that. Magistrate's Patience on critical strike applies damage over time to foe or heal over time to allies. Again, I'm going to have to change that because I don't use crits. But the problem is the other option is, well, Cavalry's Warning. And I don't really have a legendary mount yet. Gladiator's Gall. Move faster when your stamina is high. Regen stamina when it is low. Black Stallion. Absolute must-have, just because moving around quickly is nice. I can probably change up some of these pretty easily, throw in different mounts, because I've got a fairly decent selection. But ideally, what you want to do is you want to go power and defense. You want additional rewards for when you kill things. Just because these are the things that will really make your class shine. And yes, all of the insignia bonuses do carry over. So you don't have to have one of these as your summoned mount at all times. Every mount here, you get their insignia bonuses. And yes, I am in the process of upgrading those as well. So, anyways, so that is pretty much it for me talking for the time being, because I have just gone top to bottom on pretty much everything I have here. As you can see, yes, I've stacked power. No, I haven't stacked critical strike, just so you can have kind of an idea. My critical chance is only 12%. That is as low as I've been able to make it for the time being. I will probably find another way to make it even lower yet if I can. Now, as I mentioned in one of my other videos, damage resistance is a little low, 47.5%. That's actually mostly right now, I think, coming from the fact that I'm right near campfire. And deflection chance, 20.8. Again, I can do better, and I'm going to do better with that. But all in all, that's how that build works. So let's actually get this build in action. I'm not going to say too much from here on out, because you've just literally spent, I don't know, what about, we'll say 30 minutes listening to me talk. And I will go through one of the other weeklies here for Bryn Shander, the new content we have. You will also see Everfrost damage in action if you've never been here before. And other than that, I do hope you guys enjoy. If there's anything for me to say, I will say it. Other than that, I'm going to shut up now. Alright, so that is the Paladin in action. So, one thing I didn't really touch on, by the way, was kind of why you'll notice, actually, you'll probably see it here, my stats in that fight, where my power was sitting at 43,000, now it's dropped to 16. Well, between the buffs I get from my companion and one of the built-in abilities of the Paladin itself, your power just keeps going up in combat as you take damage. So this is one of the big reasons why you want a good hit point pool. I mean, I can do better than this. I can actually probably pull it closer to 150 grand. But I haven't yet. It's going to get there. And then we're going to start seeing this number creep up even more. So that you have an understanding as to why, this is actually it here. So with the protection, your damage resistance is increased by 10% when you generate 500% more threat. Definitely both pluses. When you take damage, you gain power proportional to the amount of damage you took. So if you take 1% of your total hit points in damage, you gain 1% damage output. Power. You gain 1% of your you gain 1% of that in power. This bonus caps in 10% of your max HP and power. So I can gain a maximum of 14,300 power on top of the stat you already see there. Nothing wrong with that. Now, I didn't touch on powers before I ran the run, except for briefly mentioning I had Burning Light slotted in there. This is actually what helps melt enemies when you've got the Owlbear, by the way. Divine Judgment I'm using for the extra damage in an AoE. The powers I'm using here, these are the powers that I've settled on for my character and the build that I'm running. There are a couple things you can change. The things you should not change are Radiant Strike and Valorous Strike, unless you are having difficulty holding aggro. Always keep Radiant Strike, though. Replace Valorous Strike with Oath Strike. Make sure that for encounter powers you always have Templar's Wrath, because this is why you stay alive. Just so you know, because again, like I said, not everyone has to watch on my old video, 300% of the damage you do in an area of effect around you gets turned into temporary hit points. That is why my hit point bar in those fights went yellow. They have to chew through that first before they can actually hurt me. This is also why you should pretty much always be at full hit points at all times, which is why the Earth Elemental bonus works. Ore of Wisdom, 10% increased recharge speed. Actually, really at this point, I'm sitting at 25% increased recharge speed, but whatever. Binding Oath. This has an invincibility mechanic to it for a grand total of 8 seconds. You are at max rank. You are invincible. You take 50% of all the damage that this absorbs in 8 seconds, and deal 20% of it to every enemy around you. Very handy. Can it kill you? Yeah, it can totally kill you. Because the damage you do can't exceed your maximum hit points. That means, in theory, you could actually probably kill yourself, I don't know, 5 times, well, no, more than that. Let's see. Two and a half times over. Yeah, you could kill yourself about 2.5 times over pretty easily. Now, and again, no, I haven't done that to myself yet, although I will tell you something very interesting about being in Brinchander. You take Everfrost damage based off of the amount of damage you take from an attack. Binding Oath actually counts for that. So, Binding Oath can hurt you more than its stated amount because you take additional Everfrost damage from it. So, you be careful with that. Vow of Enmity. So, as I mentioned, if you're having trouble holding aggro, this is actually going to be one of your big ones for aggro generation if you're running with a lot of high-end players. Throw this on a boss. the damage they do, the attacks that they make, become threat generated for you. Once you have this on a guy, unless someone taunts that boss off of you, so if you're running with another tank and they kind of want to be a little bit of an asshat, you should never lose that target. That's just how this works. Now, other abilities that I've used, Circle of Power, very useful. Relentless Avenger, also relatively useful in certain situations. By and large, I probably wouldn't use Circle of Power over, say, Vow of Enmity, or, better yet, Bane. Now, Bane is an interesting one. If you're having damage, if you have incoming damage problems, which can happen, Bane is probably going to be your best friend in that, because you can throw 3 stacks of this on a target and it reduces their outgoing damage by 30% and increases their incoming damage by 30%, and that affects everybody in your party. So it doesn't matter where that damage is coming from. They take 30% more damage from that at all times. And if you drop the cooldown the way I have, by taking it to rank 4, you will actually have 2 stacks of this that you can reapply before the timer runs out. So, I mean, right now I've got mine lasting, 12, 14, 16 seconds? Yeah. It says it's a 12-second recharge. It's about, I think, about 6 right now with my cooldown reduction. So 6-second recharge. Just before it runs out, I have 2 stacks that I can reapply pretty much right away. But once it's at 3 stacks, you only need to apply 1 stack just to keep it refreshed. So definitely worth having as a backup power to use. And the only power you ever replace is your last encounter power, which I like to refer to as my utility power. In this case, for me, it's Burning Light, but I will swap out Burning Light for Bane or Vow of Enmity, or even sometimes I actually will still use Circle of Power. And that's just simply because 25% damage resistance, and the increase to the 30% of the damage that I do to the target. So, very handy, especially if someone else is running Bane, because the 2 actually kind of stack. If you have a Healadin in your party, and you can get them to put Bane on a boss, and you run Circle of Power, you should have 0 problems with incoming damage and outgoing damage. Even if you're not running Burning Light, even if you don't have the Owlbear pet. This is actually really kind of something that's important as you go. Anyways, I think for now I have said enough. If anyone out there has any questions about this, please do ask. I do main the Paladin. I can answer any questions you throw at me. Other than that, I hope all of you have had a good time. I hope to see you in game, and have fun in Faerun.